At the end of Mandalore's review on the first Stasis game, he specifically stated that this was next, and I don't think I've ever heard him do that before. All I can assume from that is that this means that this game is going to be top tier. Because honestly, the first game, while it did have its shortcomings, you could see the structure of like a really, really good horror game. They just needed a little more time to cook and potentially just better resources, better funding here and there. But with this being the sequel, I hope that it's able to cover for the lost ground that the first game had. But anyways, as per usual, please make sure to go and support the original video. Link to that is always at the very top of the description. Show some love over on Mandalore's channel before coming back here to watch the reaction. But alright my dudes, let's get right into it. Gotta have a similar intro.
A door?
Wait, what was that?
What'd you use, dynamite?
Is that a bear?
Toys, Mac.
He has a gun now?
I love the callback though. Similar intro as to the first review. I believe this particular game isn't set out in space either, but on a deep sea oil rig, I think. Mandalore, the goat.
After enjoying the horrors of deep space, you can now enjoy the horrors of the deep sea. Stasis Bones.
Oh, bro. Every single time horror plus deep sea gets mentioned, I immediately think of Soma. Man. Soma was such an experience. It was probably the best horror game I've ever played in my life. If you guys haven't played it yet, I highly recommend it. It was awesome. Deeply moving, and it's one of those games that just made me kind of break down on stream. I'm not usually the emotional type, but that game really hit me.
Totem is a standalone sequel to Stasis and Kane, so you can enjoy it perfectly fine without knowing a thing about those games.
Oh,
if you do,
I read in the comments afterwards that apparently the voice actress for the main character in Kane is actually Jinx from League of Legends. And that baffles me because Jinx's voice acting is incredible. For Kane, all I can think of is that the voice director probably didn't give the right directions in that. Because the voice actress has a ton of talent. She has a great range, and she could definitely do the maniacal laughter a lot better than what was going on with Kane.
You'll have more insight into the world and know terms like products already, so beyond a few throwbacks, there's nothing essential. Since I did make a video on the previous game, I'll talk about those connections more when I get deeper into the story, but I like that it has elements that could work in different ways if you are a newcomer, like how casual people are about the hellish biotech everywhere. Still, I don't want to get too
Interesting. I do enjoy it when video games are able to make a sequel that is standalone or can be played before going back to play the original. This was something that I really appreciated when I played The Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative, because at the very beginning of the game, it just straight up asks you whether or not you had played it before, and if you haven't, then they won't show you any spoilers for the first game. And if you did, they show you some references to it, although the case itself is completely separate from the original case. The Somnium File games are by the same creator behind the Zero Escape series, if some of you guys are more familiar with that. Uchigoshi's mind is bonkers. That guy is crazy, and I love all the works that he's made so far, so yeah, definitely check it out.
too far ahead, so here's the setup. Oh, this is gonna go great again.
Oh.
You play as Charlie and Mac.
We start off exactly as we did in the first game.
And today, the gang explores a derelict oil rig. And it's guaranteed to be the worst ocean outing since Cold Fear. Or Virus.
I don't know either of these.
Charlie and Mac are a married couple who have fallen on hard times. They are drowning in debt, and their daughter Hope actually drowned when she tried to save her teddy bear who was swept out to sea. The bear, named Moses, is also struggling with blame and guilt. He's an AI smart toy who's having difficulty even fully comprehending it. Mac
I was wondering what the bear was. An AI smart toy. I don't know exactly when in the timeline we are with the first game, but it is set in the sci-fi distant future, so not too surprising.
Has a lot of resentment towards Moses and dismisses his intelligence. Moses appears to not fully grasp death and brings her up to Mac a lot, which is of course upsetting. However, him being so little is useful for salvaging, so Charlie's rigged him up to be able to hack computers and help them in their task. So, you play as Moses too.
I miss Hope, Charlie.
Look at that.
I do too.
I miss playing with her.
Look at him go!
I do too.
Is it wrong to wish I could stop missing her? Sometimes I feel guilty for wishing it.
No, I think that,
That's heavy.
it isn't wrong at all.
My Charlie.
A classic for any sci-fi story. To have that artificial intelligence attempt to understand human emotion. Considering the nature of the game, we'll likely be exploring that facet much more. Some people may say that it's overdone, but I feel like there are several video games and shows out there that are capable of using that initial premise and changing up the formula a little bit or coming to a different conclusion. I think these tropes, or so-called tropes, are tropes because they're just really, really good basis for a story. And I do think it's fitting here considering the amount of emotions or complex emotions this couple must be going through, given their current situation and the loss of their daughter. To have this AI bear just be so incredibly blunt about everything. It's a great use because it helps those characters get through those emotions, as well as help us as the player to understand them better.
The difference is, if you are coming from Stasis, is how much more character-driven Bone Totem is. Where John Marichek was a ragdoll of human suffering, here, the actual ragdoll is one of the more interesting video game characters I've seen in ages. They give you way more opportunities to care more, which is good when the game will last you at least a dozen hours or so. Anyhow, the rig is called Deep Sea 15 and is owned by the Kane Corporation, a gigantic company and a major religion. Kane offers a brain implant that, on death, will transfer your entire consciousness into a virtual afterlife.
Oh no, oh god. I'm not gonna say it, but I already spoke about it earlier. If you know, you know, I don't want to spoil. But instant flashbacks, man.
There, in the Nexus, you will live with your loved ones forever, as long as they opted in. Heaven is real, and it's also Amazon Prime. Again, business as usual in the setting is already bizarre and unsettling. So when you start finding corpses of Kane employees arranged in ritualistic patterns, this is not considered a deal breaker. Mac isn't happy with it because it could still be an active crime scene and does want to go, but Charlie reminds him that they have seen bodies and other heinous things on the job before, and they really need this money. So, Bone Totem is all about seeing how far they'll be pushed for hope. And good God does it go far.
What Kane is that?
I don't want to show too much, but let's talk about the visuals. While Kane showed some clear roughness into moving over into proper 3D, 6 years of experience later, and Bone Totem nails it. Background elements can still be 2D or 2.5D, but a lot has been fully converted over to the third dimension.
I mean, just on this initial glance, everything looks like it fits together, much more than the first Stasis game even. Because in that game, the character model just kind of popped off the screen. It didn't really feel like he was in the same universe, but, you know, suspension of disbelief and all that. And from them walking around, you can kind of feel the weight of their movement more, rather than the floaty running that the main character of the last game did. So there's certainly improvements in that aspect as well.
Even if it might not look it. Surfaces in the environment are a lot more reactive to light and shadow, which, beyond just more realism, adds a lot more depth into the image. Your character can be obscured by smoke and fog, and it is very atmospheric. Looking back, John Stasis was an impressive sprite to the degree that people didn't think he was a sprite. I was unsure of that shift at first, but on the character side, it's such a huge improvement. It's several techniques coming together to make an incredibly rich-looking game. You're also given a nice variety of places to explore that shift and evolve as the story goes forward. All the close-ups they use for puzzles or investigating look great for an adventure game. Almost everything has lots of weathering and little details. And sometimes...
That's awesome, but I can't wait to see some of the moon logic puzzles. Now, every single adventure game that we've covered so far has to have at least a few of them, even the good ones.
The puzzles themselves are just as unpleasant as the world they're in. Most of the deranged, horrible things you'll have to do will be front and center. You only use items in the close-up windows now, and never from the zoomed-out perspective. Which I do think the game could have benefited from a few more angles on these, but it does mean less confusion. The actual art direction's cassette future combined with Nightmare Biotech feels like something that would clash, but it actually does come together. It's one of the most visual...
I don't know why I didn't think of this in the previous reaction, but a lot of these visuals instantly made me think of this manga series called Blam. If you guys haven't seen it before, I do highly recommend it. It's like one of my favorite manga ever, as super dark, super gritty, sci-fi. The backgrounds are incredible. Honestly, some chapters don't even have any dialogue. It's all told through the characters traversing these massive mega structures, and you can tell so much from just the environment. I I know I'm probably repeating myself there, but it's hard to explain how you can understand a story from that, but you do. I have never seen a series before be able to achieve that or give me the exact same feeling. It's just that some of the images here kind of invoke that memory, I suppose.
Really interesting and atmospheric isometric games I've played overall, not just an adventure one. They made so many creative decisions, like take Moses. They could have easily made him a cute little teddy bear like the one from AI, but instead he has unsettling and kind of terrifying human features. Because he too runs off biotech, a product of David Cronenberg's Build-A-Bear workshop. Even innocent, good-natured toys for children in the setting are still...
Does that mean that he's also a product that was literally turned into a stuffed bear product? We could get super dark with his backstory, and that's probably where we're going, if I had to hazard a guess here.
Still part of the nightmare, especially when you know where the research to make things like Moses came from. It's similar to Stasis, where they confront you with the horror of how the sausage is made, which has real-life basis, but is amped up to even more ghoulish levels here. It gives you lots of interesting aspects to think about like that, when it's intended. There are two drawbacks to the graphics, and one is by far my biggest problem with the game. The first is there are plenty of pre-rendered cutscenes, and actually very visually ambitious for a team of this size. But it is in that zone where the motion capture or facial animation isn't quite caught up with the fidelity of the models, so dialogue can be slightly out of sync, or characters can look firmly in the uncanny valley territory. There are still some genuinely great sequences, but there are also plenty of times where you see that budget coming through. It's not a huge deal, but the second is more tricky. See, you frequently find PDAs from other characters, and they have these little animated portraits. It reminded me of something like the classic Fallout games, but something felt off. The frequently high cheekbones and gaunt faces, strange designs for characters like a chief medical officer or a biologist, and that nodding. Oh dear god, it's Balenciaga.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna take a shot in the dark and say these are AI characters. This is a can of worms with good reason, but let's examine these inside of the game itself. To its credit, the weird uncanny valley effect in these faces does feel appropriate, but many designs don't match their logs or just look too artificial. It becomes a problem when you show a major character and the AI couldn't decide whether or not he was wearing glasses. This is so aggravating and distracting for a few reasons. There's other AI art too, I see nonsense language down here, but none of it is necessary. You'll come across computer terminals that foreshadow future events or give you more insight into what's happening. This is all well and good when there's intention behind them. Others are just nonsense, scary image. It's a cheap way to add production value that it didn't need, and worse, it distracts from the actual story. Does this clue have meaning to it, or was it nonsense that an AI put together? They're in the same places, so I don't know.
That is... yeah, especially for a game that I think was really good at foreshadowing future events. Having all this clutter doesn't really help, and especially because it's made by AI and it hits that uncanny valley that only AI can hit. It's certainly its own can of worms that if you bring up in really any YouTube video, there's gonna be like a million comments underneath it, with many people arguing with each other. Personally, I don't think it'll ever be able to replace a human artist, and I think it's okay to use in video games when it comes to like NPC dialogue. Like, can you imagine talking to an NPC and they're able to adapt to the current situation or player input? Now, obviously, it's not going to be able to create like deep emotional stories that really only humans can write. So don't do that for any of the main characters, but if it's an inconsequential NPC in an open world game, I think that could certainly benefit the industry as a whole. I mean, it's gonna take a few years for it to get there, but that could be pretty cool. It also looks like, from the YouTube chapter name here, now removed from the game, the AI artwork, I suppose the developers decided to take it out after feedback, which, you know, good on them. And because it didn't really add anything to the story, I don't think anything was lost.
What's really sad is that some are obvious. Like here you have some scientists with the fucked up hands, which is the mark of the beast for AI for now. But then they have another image where they're zoomed in, but they blurred out the hands for some reason. But it's the middle ground ones, where maybe an artist made this and it means something, or it's just noise, and it's hard to tell. I actually went through and read publication reviews for this game, which gave it a lot of glowing, well-deserved praise, but none of them mentioned this. I don't think I have eagle eyes for this either, but it means it's at a point where a lot of people will not notice it, and I find that genuinely unsettling. Because it's not a bad, cheap-looking game, it's a great game. It is the biggest attraction it has, and none of it is necessary. The faces look odd, the series has done that before, whatever. But sprinkling in nonsense next to things with intention it's just sad. As in, it legitimately makes me sad. You could strip it all out today and it wouldn't change the game. It's non-essential, like I said. It's like they built a rocket ship and then put a propeller on the front. Just get it off, nobody likes it. Or maybe they...
Well, eventually they did remove it, so hey, Mandalore statement stands corrected.
Did or didn't notice it, but either way, I feel a bit crazier. You might think I'm a Luddite, but in this case, the game is showing me one thing coherent, and then Grape Fence post ambulance carbon like nothing happened. Nothing did happen. This is nothing. It's nothing that takes away from the work with vision behind it. Graphics are one of the keys to unlocking emotions in players, offering a journey of discovery where imagination meets artistic expression, and we put much effort into telling a story through the visuals alone. And man, do I agree with that, Stasis Bone Totem art book. Fun fact, when I do a video on a game, whether I liked it or not, I usually go and buy the art book afterwards. I'm glad I looked ahead this time. Speaking of Brush Desk Tylenol, let's talk about the audio. For the soundtrack, Mark Morgan returned to compose the game. Most tracks are suspenseful and tense, and blend right into the rest of the ambience. The characters also get their own twists on the exploration themes. Charlie's can have more somber horns, Mac can have guitars or folksy strings, and Moses can get these childlike Jack-in-the-Box toy sounds to remind you that he is at his baseline a toy.
I mean, not gonna lie, in any horror movie, the moment any like child song or child singing happens, it unsettles me immensely. Because the ghost is already scary enough, but then you add children into the mix, probably the scariest factor of them all. After finishing the movie, I'm certainly not going to be sleeping for a few nights.
It's usually in the background maintaining the oppression, but in those big emotional moments, it does come out more to the forefront and can really elevate it. There are some guest composers and remixes as well, and the music can get more wild and a little more tribal at points. Others are like electronic remixes of Orthodox church music.
This is a interesting beat.
It's a neat soundtrack, very fitting. The in-game sound is good too, certainly way better than Stasis, but the actual audio mixing can still be weird at a few points, or can feel like sound effects are missing entirely. It comes across as strange. The elaborate deaths are now full-on cutscenes, which is great, but some can also suffer a similar issue.
I see. Yeah, I mean,
there can also be
we did talk about this earlier, but the rendered cutscenes are incredibly ambitious and they didn't really land it. But regardless of that, you can see that an attempt was made in order to increase the quality of the game as much as possible. And for that, I can appreciate them.
Strange mixing on some side characters, but the main cast is light years beyond Stasis. It can be a little melodramatic at a few points, but that was also par for the course.
Without a family, man, alone in the world, trembles with the cold.
To wax poetic in such a
moment.
moment.
Because I really like the dynamic between the main characters. Charlie wants to push forward while Mac is unsure and wants to evaluate the risks, but they want the same thing and clearly love each other, and that comes through in the delivery. Hope's loss made Mac more cautious and Charlie more reckless. Then Moses is childlike, but also a caretaker in a jailbroken state where he's still spitting out PSAs sometimes, and he has to learn about the concept of a corpse.
Hello, I am Moses. What is your name?
Moses found another body.
This place smells bad. I would like to go home now.
Gotta be fucking kidding me.
Language, Mac. Goodness. This could cause injury if it lays here.
I'm gonna cause injury to you if you keep spouting out public service announcements.
And as the game brought in...
Oh man, bro. But imagine being on the other end of the line and you hear Moses being like, "Hi, my name is Moses. What is your name?" And you can already assume that, he found another body. He just cannot comprehend the concept of death, which honestly might be for the best considering what happened in Marathon.
New characters, they all brought something to either strengthen or challenge that tie between them. One of my favorite characters was arguably an antagonist, and a lot of that came from how fun their delivery was. There are some rough patches, but the sound is good overall. Let's move on to the gameplay. It's an adventure game, this genre is full of madness, something your mileage may vary. On the Moon Logic scale, Bone Totem is extremely good. For starters, the game can be actively helpful if you do want that. By simply right-clicking, you'll activate a ping that shows all highlightable items and all
Yes! Yes! We did it! Finally! I've been talking about this in practically every adventure game we've taken a look at from Mandalore's channel. And finally, we have a button that you can just press to see everything that you need, or at least can interact with. And because it's optional, you can go back to the usual pixel hunting without using this feature as well. So that, I think, is a great implementation.
So you can and should try to find things the old-fashioned way, but if you're about to leave or unsure, you can just hit the ping. This also let them use much darker environments that would be hell on earth to try and pixel hunt through. Even without this, what you're supposed to interact with is usually logical. And the pings aren't just restricted to the overworld, they can also be in the close-ups. Items will usually have a shine or replace in an obvious way, but I did miss some at points. It's always wise to double check and not miss your breast milk pump. Anyways, if you are morbidly staring at a screen for too long, like you're an entombed silver-ranked gamer tired of their 20,000 leagues under the sea, you'll outright get a hint icon where a character can push you in the right direction. It is a lot of optional help, but the more it keeps players away from an outright walkthrough, the better. Most puzzles feel grounded, and the harder ones usually involve clue hunting. You might think you know how a machine works, but then a PDA says they overrode part of that function. Many are as simple as they look, but if they don't work in the way you think they should, it usually involves exploring. Playing 3 characters, you'll frequently be in different parts of Deep Sea 15. The system easily could have been a pain in the ass, but it is really engaging. All items you find are stored in a group quantum storage device. It's like Dropbox for your toolbox. Characters can pass items between each other at any time, and each has their own commentary on it. You get extra insight about the world, or their mindset, or their character history. These are fun on their own, but the characters can also manipulate the items. Mac has strength from a robotic arm, so he can separate an item into 2 pieces, or twist and bend them. So if Charlie finds a twisted piece of metal, she can send it over to Mac, you switch over to him, and then straighten it out. On Charlie's side, she's much more technical, so by giving her 2 items, she can combine or repair them. And no, you can't.
It's awesome that you can switch to them on the fly, and it's a necessary mechanic for the game as well. I had thought that you would be like playing one particular character doing a certain section of the story, and then once you finish that section, you move on to the next character, but this adds depth to the puzzles. And obviously there are reactions to the different items, as Mandalore stated, provides more insight into their personality, which just endears them more to the player. I think it's a great idea to do it like this.
Accidentally make stupid shit or break an item you need and softlock yourself. When I did feel stuck in a puzzle, 9 out of 10 times, the solution was switching over to somebody else. This was happening to me more early on because it does take some getting used to. But when you get the hang of it, it is really engaging. There are plenty of stimulating and downright weird puzzles. And ones where you need to find clues on a PDA or a surface or in a computer somewhere. They're not all great, but it does give you a good variety and plenty of tools to stop you from getting stuck. You may have seen some QR codes, but you don't need any for puzzles. To be fair, I didn't check many because I am biased against these. I didn't want to wave my phone in front of a video game I was enjoying, but there could be extra help in there sometimes. What the fuck is this? It's not too subtle to go, ooh, what's this? And I've only seen it in one other game so far, and it was not a mark of quality. It's not really an issue, and there could be other games doing this and I just haven't played them. I just thought it was curious. You can and will be stumped at points or wonder why you're pouring embalming fluid into a flamethrower, but for the genre, this is pretty great.
Nice. Only other game I've seen do the QR code thing was the Somnium Files, but it was pretty inconsequential and like it showed you the video anyways in game, so you didn't really need to check it out. But they did have this whole ARG thing going on when Nirvana Initiative was going to release, and it might have been a part of that. I haven't taken a look at it yet.
As for the story, it does carry on a lot of the same themes from Stasis, except some have shifted around a bit and evolved even further. In Stasis, Kane Corp was a not Wayland Yutani, like a Leyland Toyota, but it got into the nitty-gritty of how companies do vile shit, in a way that most people who have dealt with corporate will deeply understand. You've seen the dumbass the manager wouldn't fire because they're part of their gossip gang, but they weren't in charge of, you know, the flesh machine. Bone Totem is taking ideas like that and then pushing them into new sci-fi extremes. Like if you've worked at a Walmart, specifically the morning shift, you get the sense they might want you dead. Some people embrace the dance to make their day easier, but what if they embraced Sam Walton as their god? And Sam Walton has come back from the dead. And with the Nexus, they do have a tangible afterlife. This makes their power a lot more existential. If you have indebted family members, they could reward them by releasing them into the Nexus. Sure, promise the afterlife in the same tone EA tech support promises Battlefield DLC. You'll even come across more simple Kane AI that argues back and forth on whether the company should be a corporation or a religion, because their goals can't fully align with each other. So having Mac be a follower was a good choice. At first, I thought it was strange he wasn't gunning to get out of a Kane facility since this would put his afterlife at risk. But then I realized Hope didn't have the chip, so he knows she won't be there. When Mac thinks about or comes across those who died before the Nexus, it sombers him. And sure, you can easily connect this kind of thinking to many religions, but I don't think it's an anti-religious game. It looks at a lot of aspects of it, good and bad. It's not elaborated on, but it's said that Kane has disproven God, which I'm sure employees thought on their own some days. But Kane appears to be the main religion. So when you first step foot on Deep Sea 15, and the first PDA you read is from a man having visions of being a flesh goop inside of a giant church seeing visions of Jesus, this is weird for even more reasons than normal. I'm gonna get more into the story now, which is a big undercut for an adventure game, so it's on Steam, GOG, and soon coming to console.
Okay. I personally don't mind religious context, undertones, aspects being put into my video games. I think they can be explored in many different ways and provide a completely different perspective on certain story beats. I do think it's kind of a dangerous, I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but I think it's a dangerous aspect to use in your story because oftentimes it can go very, very wrong, and instead of enhancing the story, it kind of takes away from it immensely when you know that the writer isn't very familiar with religion and they have a very shallow outlook on things. However, I do find it appropriate to use it within this story given the subject matter as well as the setting, and I find it a very unique take to incorporate the religious aspect with the company or black company aspect of the story. I don't think actually, never mind. There have been video games that have done this before, but just did it in a different direction from what we're currently going for. It's awesome to know, though, that there are games out there that kind of push the boundaries and make you really think of what you believe in. I think that's one of the strong aspects of games being an interactive medium as opposed to the usual movies or TV shows that we consume. Because those kind of narratives or messages hit much harder when you're the one actually doing it and making said decisions and being a part of that story.
Hopefully this will be gone by then, so if you don't want spoilers, go to here.
We are here for the lore.
There were moments where I thought Bone Totem's story was made for me in a lab, even before the Forbidden Ancient Ones.
The Ancient
It's some of the most
Ones.
fun I've had with an underwater horror game since Soma, or Iron Lung, or
Hey.
Barotrauma. Well, not Barotrauma.
Jesus fucking Christ.
They waste no time getting you into the mystery.
I haven't seen Barotrauma before. I have been recommended it, but I think it's a co-op multiplayer game, although the co-op part of that is questionable, considering some of the videos I've seen in passing.
The empty oil rig in Come to Jesus PDA was the first warning, but the first door you open has the horribly mutilated body, with flowers or fungus either growing or placed inside of the eye sockets. Either way, they clearly did not do this to themselves. Deep Sea 15 was stationed above the Mule, the mobile underwater laboratory environment. Something went wrong down there, a quarantine was ordered, and now everyone is dead or missing. Deep Sea 15 was not an oil rig, it was some kind of research lab.
Of
Now,
course.
starting off with lab gone empty and possible fungus problem, it seems like it could be a retread of Stasis. The Groom Lake couldn't be recovered, and this is the new lab.
But no, they're not going to do that. It is a very powerful tool, though, to use the viewer's expectations against them. One such movie in recent memory that did exactly that was, I think it was called Orphan, The First Kill. I actually really enjoyed the twist in that movie, and if you guys have seen the first Orphan movie, I do highly recommend checking it out. I mean, all stories should be very good at manipulating their viewers' attention, their expectations, their emotions. But I think when it comes to horror, that is even doubly so. That's probably why a lot of horror movies kind of fall flat, because they're unable to understand their viewer and understand what they fear most.
To clear that up, I am going to talk more about Kane. Kane, the free game. This takes place in a different off-world Kane Corp research facility, one that is next to the Groom Lake, which is being salvaged or retrofitted. Space is big and lawless, and the company prefers to do their dirty work off-world if they can help it. In this case, the protagonist had gotten pregnant from an employee who was part of a massive plan to impregnate her with Kane. He talks to her the whole game because his memories were implanted or something, and she just writes it off as a weird voice. Until she births him, so that's how Kane came back.
Jeez.
Kane is a fucking bizarre game. But it did establish the company has all of space to work with. They can do whatever they want out there with no oversight, so if they're bothering with a rig, it's because it has to be right here.
It's a scary thing to think about once humanity reaches that kind of state. Because yeah, space is such a vast area, like how are you going to be able to control everything? Or keep things under wraps, or make sure that companies aren't doing illegal stuff out in some sort of distant galaxy? It would just be impossible.
Staff did see scientists with small, strange flesh creatures, but that's par for the course. Deep Sea 15 has shockingly little information on what was happening. Moses does prove himself useful breaking into ship systems, but Max still despises his presence. There are plenty of corpses, but the only tangible leads come from a biochemist's report. They were experimenting with something called P139. They were testing on bone marrow, though it's not clear for what, and in storage, they have a gigantic ancient disc and some kind of sarcophagus.
P139 on bone marrow. Could this have something to do with how the scientists from the last game wanted to input data onto the wife's skeletal structure or inside of her bone marrow or something like that? We kind of glossed over that detail and I kind of just accepted it as fact because, you know, it's sci-fi. Or maybe this has something to do with the quote-unquote ancient ones that we discovered here.
This is Mac's breaking point and he wants to go now.
God damn it, you take too many risks too easily.
And you don't fight hard enough for things that are important. Mac, this one time, will you just trust me?
I love this dynamic, actually. Two characters that very clearly love each other and yet have opposing ideals. Having to find the middle ground on things, or switching priority between people whenever it comes to the decision making.
We're all we've got left.
We're all we've got left.
Moses, you're not a part of this.
Fine. Okay. Okay.
They'll take a quick ride down to the mule and pop back up if things look bad.
Yes.
Things look
There
really
are
bad.
bodies. We've worked with bodies before. So far there's been
So
nothing.
far.
Why?
I'm sorry, Mac, but you know I'm right. You know without this, we're at a dead end. We won't be able
Are we
to.
underwater?
Just for a little while, Mose.
I do not like water. In water you are powerless.
At least the bear gets it.
Oh, lovely.
This is the moment I realized I would play the game all night. We're moving seamlessly from bizarre, well-established sci-fi horror into something more Lovecraft. At least it sure looks that way, since obviously Kane wasn't behind whatever that was. Though what's great about it is it's still just some foreshadowing. The mule was the main lab, and man-made horrors will still carry on to the very end.
This is not safe for children.
After a series of unfortunate events, James Cameron's Wonka Vader is swamped, and the group is separated throughout the mule. This is where you get more of the horror of the setting, with some nice callbacks to the start. Like earlier when you found a heart inside of a corpse that was still beating, nobody raised an eyebrow. Many Kane organs will outlive the users. When Moses comes across another beating heart inside of a corpse, now they're horrified, because the body is covered in plants and they don't know why the heart is beating. They're so desensitized to the visuals of biotech that it's just the abstract that bothers them now. DIY home repair now requires some surgical knowledge. The mule has plenty of other examples. A lot does look disturbing, but because of this setting, only certain things will bother the characters. The server's working off giant brains, which are now not working because they're rotten or dying. A bad sign, but business as usual. A different brain birthing a large, human hand-covered spider creature. Now
What
this
the-
is some cause for concern. There's
Yeah.
plenty of strange biotech to find,
kidding.
but I won't go through those. Besides having dreams of Jesus in a church, other employees had different visions. An engineer dreams of being ritualistically sacrificed, until he microdosed on P139 and then also saw Jesus, rising from a
Wait, no, microdosed on P139, then it's some sort of substance, some medicine? Something that can be consumed that drastically changes the person. It has to have been something harvested from this whatever they discovered down here.
quivering mass of flesh. The company didn't write off these visions, but instead began to test it on products in stasis. All criminals or volunteers who were in debt to the company, of course. One researcher addresses this more directly, saying that Kane doesn't need to hide what they do anymore. Oh right, she also monitors the dreams of the products and has fallen in love with one and is sure they'll run away together. That's thwarted by the product having something growing in her. There's a separate problem from P-139.
Loud noises.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
What the
what
hell
is
was
that?
I didn't see. What happened?
It's like some kind of giant fucking insect.
Language, Mac.
Like the Groom Lake, it's a collection of problems, but this time around, they do have closer ties. The PDAs are all about digging into the central mystery and the ties between them. This did come at a cost where you don't get the more personal, reflective ones like from the first game. Those could have very detailed side stories and characters that Bone Totem only gets slightly into, focusing more on some central pillars. There's already a lot of mystery meat.
A lot of pros and cons depending on the type of storytelling that you're going for. You win some, you lose some, as expected.
To dig through. Back to that, protocol was being broken all over the place, with one biologist awakening products from STASIS to test P-139. You learn that it's a microbe, and it can be found in most of the local sea life. The cold and pressure mainly keeps it dormant, but many animals live extraordinarily long lives with it.
I see. A microbe. Could this be harkening back to the first game where we were breathing in all those fungi, all those spores? Was it a similar substance, or was it the same?
While traveling the seafloor, Charlie comes across a gigantic maggot that's been feeding off a whale fall for who knows how long. And it's been feeding next to the carcass of a Spanish galleon. When the shark carcass gets heated back up, it's moving. The microbe is incredible at keeping things alive, and that's what the Kane Corp is interested in. A disgruntled employee released it into the mule, and it apparently causes madness. A surviving researcher named Ferran contacts you over the radio, and he's completely incoherent. He does know where an escape vehicle is, if you bust him out too.
Black. Dark. Can't see. Can't move.
Well, when it comes to humans, even if you might live longer, you're not exactly in a state of living.
Infected staff would confuse dreams with real life. Heavily infected products for testing could bleed from every pore but still be coherent and suddenly speak Russian. A scientist believes they're being eaten by cannibals. A researcher whose brain was put in a product's body to extend their own life is now being haunted by the old body who is tormenting them. It's a madhouse, and the corporate quarantine team had been murdering anyone they came across. There's also mention of something called a Newman buried in the facility, which is something living that has value to the corporation. And all of this was happening next to the discovered ruins of an ancient civilization, and they had mills for grinding up bones.
Then I would assume the Newman is in reference to the beings that used to be here. It just makes me think of the Newmans from Elden Ring, which I don't think is what we're going for here.
This is getting dense.
Kane's rain.
Oh my god!
Are those bodies? It's a creature made of bodies?
The civilization was in a pocketed cave system, one that Kane put a proper sealed cap over before breaking into it. There are still a few ancient machines working, but still no sign of any living staff who have been similarly butchered. The insects in the cave system have the same gigantism and longevity as the sea life, but they're mainly feeding off the dead and don't appear to be actively hunting. This isn't the work of aliens either, as the civilization was an earthly one, but sunk thousands of years ago. Their culture was more
We're doing a play on Atlantis, potentially?
scientifically advanced than their peers, but their brutality could put even the Aztecs to shame, which is saying something. As for the Newman, whatever it is, it's important enough that it's included in the religion's prayers. There was even news that a new one was born after the old one was acting up in the Nexus. The ruins have more ritualistically killed Kane staff, more working machines. The bone grinders are still operational, and get this, the structures are thousands of years old, but the newest bones are from 1650. Ferran says there's a lot that doesn't make sense about their culture.
Does that mean that there are still some alive down here? Are we gonna run into one of these Newmen? Or a Newman?
Like dating being all over the place, iconography from way later civilizations. The most baffling is that Kane found this place by picking up an old distress signal, a Soviet one from the 1980s, and they did find a few bodies.
Or maybe some time thing is going on here. Maybe they were so advanced that they're able to manipulate time's flow and or maybe jump timelines. Considering how the animals that are infected by this thing here are able to live for much longer than normal, it's not too out there or out of the ballpark.
They were found on the ocean floor, but inside the ruins, they found the ancients had carved a large stone symbol of the Red Fleet. How the hell is this possible? Bone Totem throws a lot at you. There are some dead ends from leads that were just Kain experimenting around, or the microbe acting on its own, and it is fun to uncover all of it, which is why I hated the little distractions in such a compelling story. I'm going to have to abridge a lot, and while I won't show everything, you can still get off now. I'll be ducking most of the character moments because they won't have the same impact in this video. With that, things take another turn when Charlie starts calling out for Caliban.
Caliban?
She's
You're here
been
for
affected.
Caliban. Oh, why am I not surprised?
Caliban? Who's Caliban?
The one she brought you here to find. It all makes sense now.
Oh, our characters are keeping secrets from each other. No wonder why she was so insistent on exploring them. She had her own ulterior motives.
Moses is confused. You're a boat captain. You know the odds of stumbling upon any one specific object in the middle of the ocean are infinitesimally small. Much less during a storm.
No, I was there. I was there when...
He's right, Mac. We didn't just find the rig.
Okay, then who's Caliban?
Charlie led you in, and Mac can yell all he wants, but she won't elaborate because she's so busy looking for Caliban. She seems terrified to tell him why. You know, beyond the fact she led them to the Mangale 4D experience and then directly into the Tomb of Unspeakable Evil. When she makes contact with Caliban, Mac is more furious than he's been all game. Caliban is
Rightfully
a Kain
so.
AI, an unshackled one and not like the holograms you saw earlier. And for Mac, this is an existential experience. Caliban was trapped down here, but an anti-Kain terrorist organization called Yellow Leaf contacted Charlie to break him out. Caliban even correctly guesses it is Yellow Leaf because he is very good at collating.
They want to help it.
Help it? They want to destroy Kain. That's all they've ever wanted, and if they get their hands on one of their AIs, they definitely can. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. Charlie, this is one of the Newman. It's sacred. The fact that we're even talking with it.
This is a Newman, and Caliban's biomechanical shell is rotting and needs a transfer. Mac never outright says why it's divine, but it does make sense.
The biomechanical AI is referred to as the Newman in this instance. And I gotta keep on remembering that Kain is seen as a religion. And I believe it was mentioned earlier as well that Mac was a follower, and which is kind of why he speaks about Kain quite a lot. And he's like, by Kain, what is this? With this new development, though, I find it highly unlikely that Mac is gonna be making it out of this one. Or maybe everybody survives. Or maybe only Moses gets to the end of the game. That would be pretty fun. Or actually, imagine if they place Caliban into Moses' body. Could they do that?
The Nexus is a massive afterlife network which required 9 different AI in order to run it properly. It's not said why he was disconnected, but Kain Corp happily left him at the bottom of the ocean. It's unlikely anyone at Kain wants to be the one to kill a Newman. Because they manage the virtual afterlife, interacting with the dead there, but also interact with our world, this essentially makes Caliban a tangible angel. And he's a demanding little shit who wants to deal with terrorists, so Mac's worldview is crumbling. And his day just gets worse.
Integrate me into your placement.
Wait, why?
A sign of trust. We will be bonded, inseparable. You should be honored.
I don't
Charlie,
think that's a great idea.
No. Don't do this.
I have to.
Why?
Oh boy.
What is this all about?
We can have her back,
What?
Mac.
How?
Her who?
Hope. We can have Hope back.
Of course, it's not a coincidence that their daughter was named Hope.
Yellow Leaf has already cloned Hope. It jumped past the point of should we do this to she's already here. Using prediction techniques and all other kinds of factors, she is based off Hope on the day she died. Understandably, Big Mac is not loving it.
Hear her. What is that?
Cease the bickering. The decision is made. No alternatives exist. I am.
You're so
I'm
demanding.
not talking to you. Charlie,
You can see the beats of a more simple story where Mac would convince Charlie not to go through with it and Hope won't really be our daughter, but it blew right past the ethical what-ifs and now asks, what do you do now that this is here? Which is a much harder question to grapple with. And Caliban will only merge with Charlie. I tried the others.
That didn't go so well. Never mind.
Caliban doesn't take over her brain, but this is yet more Kane heresy. Even if Mac is starting to buy out of it, Kane will never stop hunting them. A Newman is too damn powerful and important, knows most of their secrets, and Caliban is vengeful. Charlie knew this too, but what they had to offer was simply too great.
I'm scared.
Stop it.
I'm sure you are, sweetheart, but you're safe here. Nothing can hurt you.
I guess whether you view this as a miracle or extremely fucked up does depend on your worldview, which is reflected here. Mac.
Yeah. Oh, God. All these sci-fi stories always asking the tough questions. If it's a clone of your daughter on the day that she died, does that mean that it is still your daughter? Because she probably has all the memories and life experiences that your daughter had, and yet it's still a clone. Everything would be exactly the same, but it's not the exact one. But does this clone have a soul? This clone experiences the full range of human emotions, so it is probably undoubtedly human? Probably and undoubtedly don't really go well together, but it's such a strange situation. And there isn't really any right or wrong when it comes to these kind of questions. But I don't know. Bringing dead people back to life, such a touchy subject. I don't think that's... yeah, I don't know. I don't even have the words. But because of this, you can certainly understand why the mother would give in to such a demand. Because for her, she's probably like, oh, that's my daughter, and she's back, and I just need to do this one simple thing in order to get her back. And then you have it from Mac's perspective, with him also being a believer within this religion, seeing what his actual Newmen are like, having to learn about his wife's deception and their daughter being alive again. It's so overwhelming. I have no idea how he's going to respond to any of this. Will he even be able to accept this clone as his daughter if they're able to get out of here?
Mac never wants to know about this again, Charlie wants to convince him, and Moses fully accepts that she is just back. Again, it's hard to pick a correct answer when a being who believes that she is hope is back somewhere. It's more philosophical sci-fi than I expected going in, but it's very welcome. Plus, Caliban is added onto my favorite AI characters in video games. He's a brilliant and egotistical prick who's exceptional at making predictions, but if he doesn't know something or accidentally gets impressed, he gets pissy.
The dotted lines are an anomaly here.
What does that mean?
It means Caliban was never able to conclusively determine the...
I am Caliban. If I am not capable of collating in nature, then no nature is capable of being collated.
Yeah.
Of course. Apologies.
Sensitive little thing, isn't it?
What I find fascinating is that even though he is super intelligent, he's not too far in proximity from Moses. He has a deep, intimate understanding of concepts like death and grief. He also knows how Cain has used that to manipulate human beings, so sees himself as beyond emotion. And when Mac agrees, that's a wake-up call for him too. Even though the plan is for his sake, when confronted, Caliban immediately points out how it's clearly not the real hope and what they're doing is irrational. But with his pettiness, ego, and desire for revenge, he is emotional too, but he doesn't see it that way. He conceptually gets everything, but can't self-reflect. On the other hand, Moses feels a ton and isn't afraid to express it. He's very self-reflective, but has trouble wording how he feels in detail. Mac blames him for the death of his daughter, but never noticed how much Moses blames himself too.
Mac is right. My fault. I am not a good bear.
No!
When it turns out Ferran is trapped and there's no way to rescue him and he'll...
Oh my god. An AI self-reflecting on their own actions. It's so funny how when an AI self-reflects on themselves, do we understand ourselves as human beings more. It's like, why can't we humans just do that? But I suppose simplifying it all into a being that is capable of logically assessing themselves and what they're currently going through makes it all the more clear for us, because we're just so complex sometimes. Sometimes we don't want to accept the truth. So many incredible stories with this particular story beat. While the Nier series isn't necessarily horror, I would still recommend it here if you enjoy this kind of philosophical sci-fi questions.
He'll die with the life support. Moses bonds with him and they support each other up until the end of the game. Faran being doomed doesn't mean the rest of his life will have no value. They stay in contact over the radio and Faran remains helpful. Moses has to confront his fear of water and by extension, his guilt over Hope dying. And Faran is who pushes him forward.
I am failing again.
Those feelings. Lies. Push forward. Push forward, and I will prove it to you.
Hope.
Here, strength does not matter. Only courage.
It's a nice little side story about how two broken people can still support and help each other. And even while the Newmen are supposed to be divine, Moses is much more of an angel. In the Hallmark way, because Caliban still wins the biblically accurate design. Caliban...
Yeah, true. I'm not a Christian, but from what I recall, when the angels appeared, they had to tell people to not be afraid of them because they were probably extremely terrifying, likely in both appearance and in presence. And I mean, the bear's named Moses. Like, it was the pretty on the nose is what we were going for here. There's a very smart implementation of these religious tones, though.
And sees things like love leading to grief as a weakness. He will never understand that grief is the final, most painful and purest expression of love. Grief shows you how much you had, and Caliban will never understand that, but Moses could.
I am a very smart bear now.
The good news is that Caliban's freakish intelligence does reveal a lot about the Ancient Ones.
This is them submerged? But how? How could they survive?
Breathe underwater?
Air pockets within their structures and geographical anomalies, combined with the natural resistances of the society itself. 93% accuracy prediction. Food was scarce, but a new option presented itself in the form of a mutation.
Do I want to know?
The Zeeb-Hanal civilization did sink, but it swam. The microbe was once a carnivorous plant which mutated due to the new conditions after the sinking of the island, which was from simple tectonic activity. The Zeeb were changed by the microbe parasites, but so was the local environment too. They farm and cultivate insects who in turn feed off the ground-up bones of their dead. And that's present tense because a remnant population is still around. Again, the game explains this in much greater detail. So Kane employees were being murdered by the Zeeb remnant, right?
They were Kane scientists.
No.
Oh.
They were sacrifices.
What?
What was that?
The bones from 1650 were likely from Spanish treasure hunters, but the signal Kane found in the bodies were from the Soviet Union. While testing new kinds of sensor equipment, a Russian sub called the Lima crashed into one of the cave systems. The crew, thinking they were trapped aboard, got into extreme measures like cannibalism. You can still find the remains of their pantry. Their commander, Captain Boynia, was a devout Orthodox man who fell further into mania when the crew started to break out the people jerky. When they opened up the hatch to end it all and found they were run aground, this was more of a curse. The captain began succumbing to the same parasite madness. But it never was a true madness, as those infected with the microbe share memories. Some staff maintained memories, but others were overwritten by an ancient civilization, or Russians, or Spanish. But the influence spread both ways, which is how the Zeeb had such strange architecture. Memories from civilizations the Spanish or others saw. The Zeeb's goal was to return to the surface one day to take revenge on the old gods who sunk them. But
I see. The sharing of memories between those that are infected explains a lot of why they have knowledge of future stuff that they shouldn't have. I don't think I've ever seen a story quite like this before. Because when I think of stories with shared memory, those are usually stories involving multiple different timelines and the different versions of them being able to somehow cross those memories with each other. But of course, the freaking plants evolve and are able to communicate like this with each other.
But when Captain Boynia linked to them, they saw the marvels of his world, and he shared with them the marvels of his religion. The Zeeb try to recreate the memories they have of the surface now.
Pulled from my memories, my emotions.
This is how you remember the world above?
Creative license, brother.
Creative license.
The new wonders captivated them, but by the time of the game, they had long stopped listening to Boynia. Mac is feeling the effects of the microbe, and now Boynia talks to him directly, as he is still alive somewhere. In a little reversal, he too is amazed at what the future has, but he's confident the microbe can still destroy everything. He tried to placate them as a kind of penance for the horrible things he and his crew did in despair, and you do see firsthand how vicious the Zeeb can be. But they are still human at their core, and not too different to how things are now. When Charlie finds a machine that Zeeb elders would use to trick their people about the nature of their afterlife, Mac scoffs at it. How can you believe if you don't know it's real, like the Nexus?
Based on what collation? Based on what evidence?
Unprompted, Caliban offers to tell him everything about the Nexus and trade faith for straight knowledge. After all, he was adamant it was real and not faith before, right? Well, Mac declines. Naming the daughter it is very on the nose, but the game is all about hope, or the lack of hope. A complete lack of hope can create a new ambition towards something darker. Hope and belief can do a lot of good if pointed in the right direction, but they can do a lot of evil too, especially—
Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword. I mean, you can look at the Crusades for one, or the simple promise that you will be able to get into this awesome afterlife as long as you pay us enough money.
especially if your very dreams and ambitions are being manipulated, like the Forbidden Ones wanting to wipe out the surface. Luckily, Boinya's sub did have a nuclear device aboard that a very smart bear has now gotten a hold of. Everyone has to endure and see some horrible things, but Mac does make it to Boinya, or at least a memory of him. This is how the church down here would look if he wanted, and how he presented his ideas to the people. Considering all he's seen and done, he's more than willing to be the one to set off the nuke.
You are a stronger man than me.
The fire.
Let your soul find peace.
Again,
Dang.
I am leaving a lot out this round, but this was what I thought I could talk about without selling a lot of other moments short. I hammered through the game in a short time frame because I could not put it down. For how insanely bleak Stasis was, Bone Totem has a lot of heart to it. It has great themes that give you a lot to chew on, some outstanding dialogue and character moments, and a great variety of engaging puzzles and locations along the way.
I am extremely glad that this game has a lot more substance to it. And honestly, just the better voice acting and the extra elements to the story really add so much to it. I'm also going to assume the thing that we saw there was the body of the Russian guy, but because he was infected, he's just kind of been alive down here perpetually in a pretty sorry state.
I love this game, which is why the cheap AI stuff pains me so. It distracts from an otherwise home run to the point that it feels like a monkey's paw. It would feel more natural for me to scream like a feral animal for people to get it, and it's the one thing that makes me throw an asterisk on there. The console release is still coming, and this could be reverted by then, and I will update the pinned comment if that does. Because what's already here is excellent. And I'd rather the people who created those wonderful things put more into the game instead of relying on Midjourney or whatever it was. It got a little deeper than I expected this round, but no worries, Halloween is right around the corner. Expect more spooky games and a new adventure. I can feel the excitement. Have I considered hiring an editor? I've gotten many applications over the years, and I appreciate all of them. But no, because I'm far too particular, and I would probably waste more time trying to go over things. And yes, it could mean ultimately more uploads go on the channel, but I think people would pick up on them feeling different, and for better or worse, I want to be the one making these videos. I like doing this, I don't want to outsource talking about what I think is interesting. Has violence—
That's completely fair. I kind of feel the same way too, not gonna lie. I mean, it's not like I do a lot of editing here anyways. I used to do them, but after watching a ton of videos that edited videos in the same style that I used to do, I got really tired. You know, sometimes I just want to sit and watch a video in a much longer format, less edited, and just kind of more down to earth rather than the whole throw a meme in your face every few seconds or have a cut every 10 seconds to make sure that the audience is always watching to keep up that watch time, you know? The whole YouTube game has really ruined everybody's attention span. And I actually prefer these edits that Mandalore does to a lot of other channels, or like the god tier cinematography that Vati has for his lore videos. Like, that's incredible as well.
Violence in a game ever made me squeamish. The last time I can remember it, I was much younger, but it was the Strogification in Quake 4. Quake 4 has a lot of gross body horror in general. It's pretty cool. What other childhood
Never played Quake before. I have heard of it and seen it before though. Maybe someday.
aquatic video game enemies bothered me? I don't remember his name, but there was the awful anglerfish from Banjo-Tooie. A friend helped me find the secret gun in Resident Evil 4, the one in the lake, and it's not an enemy, but the oceans in Morrowind did unsettle me. I should find more undersea nightmare games to play because I don't think I get tired of them.
I do not like these sounds. They are wrong.
Yeah, the fair. I don't like them either. It's always awesome to see a sequel that actually does improve upon the original's formula, and I am glad that they have removed the AI artwork, especially considering how in-depth it really got with its presentation, its foreshadowing, and the environments and the culture essentially being picked up from all of that, because that just made the AR doubly worse when it didn't really have anything to do with the main story itself. I enjoyed the fact that there were multiple characters because it created a more interesting dynamic, rather than our main guy simply talking to some other character over the intercom or whatever. And all these questions about AI and cloning and all this usual sci-fi stuff, diving into the more philosophical side of things as well, really reminded me of the Nier series, which I am a massive fan of. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me, my dudes. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.